I'm Guy Collins, and this is Jared Whitaker. We're going to be sharing this session. We both serve as cotton agronomists for the University of Georgia. I cover Southwest, and he covers Southeast. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, we do collaboratively across the state. Many of you may have seen a number of what we're going to talk about at county meetings, and you probably will throughout the season. We've undergone some transformations recently with regard to our website. We now have a blog face to the website, so this is going to replace our monthly newsletter that we used to do. So now you'll see several posts as opposed to just one newsletter a month. On the left side here under news categories, they're going to link, or each one of these blog posts is going to link to a news category, so you can click on any of these news categories and find any of the articles that we have up there. The website still hosts a number of items that we had on our older site, like the production guide and several calculators, some of which I'm going to talk about today. The variety performance information, you can find my slides on the website. You can also look under cotton variety selection, under cotton resources, and various places to find our calculator. But we created this new site to be more smartphone friendly, so now you're able to download a lot of information in a much more timely manner than we could formerly. So if you have an iPhone or BlackBerry, you can access a lot of this information very easily and very quickly. All right, as I mentioned, if you look under cotton variety selection there under cotton resources, and also under decision aids there at the bottom, you'll find a link to our online variety performance calculator. Now, with the way this calculator works, and several of you may have seen it before, but you can select up to 5 varieties at a time to compare. You can select the type of environment you want to observe, whether that's irrigated, dry land, or combined over both. And then you can select the trial year. Now, we always encourage growers to look at multi-year data whenever possible, and as you'll hear me mention later, I think that's going to be very important moving into 2013. And then select the trial type, and that's, you're limited there to large plot on-farm trials or small plot OVT comparisons. Once you make your selections here, you click on Next there at the bottom, and then a list of all the trials that meet that criteria you selected will come up here. And then with this function, you're allowed to narrow the focus to a specific geographical region or just a handful of trials, although we do often recommend looking at as many trials as possible when making variety comparisons. Just the more robust data you have, then the better that comparison is going to be. So once you make these selections, you simply click on Calculate, and the variety comparison will come up. And that's how the varieties compare in terms of yield up here, the number of trials used to make that calculation. If you see that number is really small, you might want to modify your list of varieties there just to get more trials into the mix, into the analysis. Then down here at the bottom is some information about stability and how the variety compares to trial averages in certain situations. And this is broken down between irrigated and dry land trials or all trials combined. If you see that number is above 100, that indicates that the variety in that particular environment performed better than the trial average. All right, so in that case, it would be 6% better than the trial average for that variety across all trials. And in parentheses is the number of trials used to make that analysis. In other words, that's the number of trials that variety appeared in. Brand new varieties in many situations, you probably won't see that in such a high number, but you know, the longer we have varieties on the market, then the higher that number is going to be, and the better the assessment is going to be. So if you haven't seen this before, I would encourage you to really take a look at it. It's a very quick and easy tool to compare varieties across a broad basis. All right, I show this slide every year, and I still think it's very important. We're still in a phase shifting away from 555. Now, we've moved on in many regards, but I think knowing the most yield limiting factor, and that's down to the field or the farm level, I think is very important in dictating or predicting how a variety is going to perform in particular situations. Now, most commonly, we tend to think water is going to be our most yield limiting factor, but it could be a number of other things like weed control. If you have a pigweed situation that's out of hand, you're probably looking more towards technology options driving your variety selection process. Several things, leaf hairiness. If you're in the whitefly area around in Tifton County or surrounding areas, That could be a yield limiting factor in some situations, but really nematodes is one that really popped on the radar more so than it has on the past, mainly due to the loss of Timic and the mild winter that we had last year. But we started seeing nematode symptoms in fields that we hadn't seen it before and earlier in the year than we're normally used to. So any of these factors could influence how a variety is going to perform relative to each other. So I think it's important to know that for each particular field. All right, this slide and the next one are probably the most important slides I'm going to show you all morning. This is what it costs you as a grower to plant the wrong variety. All right, now I have several comparisons here. The top half of the chart is for dollar cotton. There was some cotton contracted to be planted in 2012 for $1, but more realistically, I think most growers were able to capture 75 cents or somewhere around there. And then I have several comparisons. The top variety compared to the bottom variety in each trial, the average of the top 4 varieties versus the average of the middle 4 varieties, and that's going to be your lowest error in variety selection. So that's going to be if you make a mistake, that's going to be the least error possible. Then the average of the top 4 versus the average of the bottom 3. All right, and this is the figures for the per acre basis. This is the single most trial where the cost was the highest, and then the trial where that cost was the least. But these 3 numbers over here are the ones I'm really going to focus on today. So the 2 things I really want to point out is these are on-farm trials. This year for Roundup trials, there was 14 locations scattered all throughout Georgia, representing nearly all of our geography that we have in our cotton belt. So this is data taken from growers' fields. This is not something I extrapolated from some small plot trial that I did on a station somewhere. So these are very accurate numbers. The second thing I want to point out is the varieties we include in the on-farm testing program are the top varieties from the top seed companies. So this is not the worst mistake you can make. All right, there are other varieties out there that could perform a lot worse than what we have displayed here. But the main thing I really want to point out is even in the best case scenario, say you don't miss choosing a variety all that bad, it's still over $120 an acre to make that mistake. All right, so even then, consider that the varieties we have are the best of the best in this program. So say that mistake is a little bit greater, that's over $340 an acre you're losing just to choose the wrong variety. So these figures are actually much higher than I thought they would be. So I think it's very important and emphasizes the importance of variety selection. Same thing for our liberty-based trials. Even then, the best case scenario is still over $100 an acre. A little bit more error there. It's over $200 or roughly $280 an acre just to make what we consider a no-cost decision if you're committed to planting cotton. Now, not considering talking about beans or corn or whatever else, but if you're committed to putting cotton in a field, you're going to have seed to do it, correct? So this is essentially a no-cost decision that you have to make. This just illustrates the geography that we capture in this on-farm variety testing program. Many of you may have either been a participant in these trials or have one very close to you. The varieties that we included in our Roundup-based trials this year, there were 11 of those. What I have displayed here is that these varieties are ranked in their descending order based on the combined average over all 14 locations that you see there. Then we have the percentage of trials in which a variety was statistically the same as the top yielder in this column, and then the percentage of the trials in which a variety was in the top 3, the top 2, or was the #1 variety in the trial. So to start with, Delta Pine 1252, 1137, and 1050. 1050 we've had, if you remember, for 3 years now. 1137, 2 years in this program, and then this is the first year we've had 1252. All 3 of those are roughly 80% of the time statistically the same as the top yielder. The same percentage there in terms of being in the top 3. And then 1252 and 1137, almost 60% of the time in the top 2, and they won about 35% of our trials there. Phytogen 499, this is the second year we've had it, almost 60% of the time statistically the same as the top yielder. All right, now most folks are familiar with the way we display variety data now. It looks like a chart with just a bunch of numbers. I don't want you to focus on the actual values. The concept is really more what I want you to see. All right, there are your varieties ranked in that same descending order based on their combined average over all 14 trials. There are your individual trials there listed at the top, just simply listed by number. The ones you see highlighted in blue indicates that that's an irrigated trial. Everything in white is a dryland trial. So right away you can see that there's a lot of variability in just dryland trials in Georgia. It's mainly due to rainfall patterns and what have you. All right, now these trials are ranked according to their combined average of all the varieties at that particular location. So one thing you see very quickly too is the lowest yield environment we were able to capture this year is still over 2 bales. Now we know that that's not a typical situation in Georgia. Most years in Georgia we're going to encounter some significant stress, and we normally have 6 or 7 trials at least in that 600 to 900 pound range. We were not able to capture that, so that's why I really emphasize looking at multi-year data moving into 2013. All right, so on the left side of this chart are you going to be your more stressed environments. As you move to the right side of the chart, you progressively get up into those higher yield, primarily irrigated situations. Now everything you see highlighted in green indicates that that variety is in the top 3 at that particular trial. So for trial number 1, for example, your top 3 varieties were Phytogen 499, Stoneful 5458, and Americot 1511. All right? So what you want to see in this display is how often or how frequent a variety appears in the top 3, okay? And then if it's not frequent, where and what type of environment does it appear in the top 3? So you can see these top 3 varieties there, those 3 from Delta Pine, and the number 1 variety in each case is underlined there, but those 3 are very consistently in the top 3 really across the board regardless of the environment we place them in. In this situation here, you just see more numbers highlighted in green. This is the percentage in which a variety was statistically no different than the top yielder. The only difference that you really see here is Phytogen 499. About 60% of the time is statistically the same as the top yielder and across the board as well. All right, looking at our Liberty-based trials, we have fewer varieties here. I'm only going to highlight the top 2. When we display it in our normal format. But Phytogen 499, over 90% of the time, statistically the same as the top yielder. Over 80% of the time in the top 2, and was the number 1 variety 55% of the time. Fibermax 1944, which is a glytol Liberty Link variety, fairly new. 55% of the time in the top 2, and it won about 1/3 of our trials there. All right, only highlighting the top 2. Again, the number 1 variety is underlined that you can see there. All right, so Phytogen 499 performs in the top 2 really across the board with the exception of 2 trials there. This Fibermax 1944 to a lesser extent, but still fairly consistent in that top 2. But you dissect this a little bit further, and this is what we talk about positioning varieties where they need to be and where they're going to perform. If you only look at the numbers that are underlined, i.e. the number 1 variety in the trial, you can see that Phytogen 499 really hugs the left side of the chart. So in these environments here, and we did capture a couple of stress situations there ranging from 600 to just over 1,000 pounds. So 499 is hugging the left side of the chart, indicating it's probably got a competitive advantage over the 1944 when we do encounter some stress. However, when we get up to that 11 to 1,200 pound range, this Fibermax 1944 tends to have a little bit more of a competitive edge over the 499. So this displays or illustrates how we need to position varieties. Then we get up to these those 3 bale environments there, and the 499 is the number 1 variety again. So I think this illustrates how we really need to be careful in positioning varieties. Same thing when looking at significance from the top yielder, just a few more numbers highlighted in green. But you can clearly see this 1944 really hugs more on the right side of the chart, indicating it probably needs to be positioned in those higher yield situations. All right, I'm not going to harp on 2011 data too much. The point I want to make here is you see from this point and to the left, from that 900 pound yield environment and down to less than 200. We were not able to capture any of those in 2012. So I think moving into 2013, it's very important that we look at multi-year data if we're going to get a true assessment for dryland variety performance. And that's naturally, it's going to exclude some brand new varieties, but I do think that's going to be something we need to look at. And you can see the varieties that perform well in those situations last year. All right, looking at OVT, one advantage of small plot OVT is that we have a lot larger list of varieties that we can compare in a given trial. Here I highlight the #1 variety in each trial in blue, and everything you see in green is statistically the same as the top yielder in each trial. OVT is broken down into early and late maturity categories, and some of these varieties we're going to talk about appear in both situations. But Delta Pine 1137, and look for as I go down the list, look for the consistency and how frequently it's either the #1 variety or no different than that #1 variety. Phytogen 499, 2 from Delta Pine 1034 and 1028, a new one from Delta Pine 1219, there's that FiberMax 1944 Glytol Liberty Link variety, and another new one from Phytogen 339. All right, looking at late maturity, Phytogen 499 there at the top, Delta Pine 1252, so we're starting to see some similarities with the on-farm trials in the small plot OVT. However, there are some differences, the primary difference being the range of environments and the list of varieties that we have. Cropland Genetics 3787, Delta Pine 1050, which has been around a while. 2 new ones here, Phytogen 575, a relatively later maturing variety, and NextGen 5315, Dynagrow 2610, and several others that you've seen before. So what's new for 2013, where every brand is bringing forward new varieties? From Monsanto, we have Delta Pine 1311, 1321, and then 1359. From Phytogen, we have 2 varieties, Phytogen 575 and 339. From Bayer Crop Science, we have 2, both of them Stoneville brand, and both of them Glytol Liberty Link varieties, those being 4946 and 6448. And then NextGen 5315. So real quick before Dr. Whitaker takes over, I do think it's always best to diversify your variety portfolio. Every variety is going to have its strengths and weaknesses, so it's important to spread out your risk by planting several and just trying them and see how they do for you. Look for those very stable, consistent varieties across the board. Below that, we really need to be careful and cautious about positioning varieties where they're going to perform their best. Brand new varieties, I always think it's best to try new things, but for brand new varieties, especially in years where we just did not have much stress at all, I think we should be very cautious moving forward. Look at multi-year data, especially if you're contemplating putting cotton in dryland situations. I can't emphasize that enough. And lastly, match performance of varieties to particular environments where they're going to be competitive. So with that, I'll leave you. I do want to thank the Cotton Commission that support a lot of what I and Dr. Whitaker do in our programs, as well as everybody down the chain with this on-farm variety testing program, our county agents, our cooperating growers, and our seed companies. It's a cooperative effort to make this happen. So I do want to acknowledge them. Any questions from me before Dr. Whitaker? All right, thank you.